Okay, we're recording, and I'm Jeff, and I'm with Tom, and this is our podcast about books, a limited series in which we invite amazing people on to talk about interesting and fun books. And this time, see, Tom, I'm going to do it this time. This time, we are looking at books that define a genre. Did I get that right?
Yeah, classics of a genre.
Classics of a genre,
Sure.
right? And our super special guest is Becca Syme.
Yay.
Becca, I'm going to read your bio just to make you uncomfortable. Becca is Becca is a Gallup certified strengths coach with a master's degree in transformational leadership and 15 years of experience in success coaching with writers, organizations, individuals, communication strategy systems, and self leadership. She teaches the popular Write Better Faster course and does strengths for writers coaching. I heard somewhere that you have coached over 5,000 authors.
It's over 6,000. Yeah. And of course that did make me uncomfortable. Thank you. That bio was great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But yeah, it's 18 years now, I think, and it
Oh,
is 6,000 plus. Yep.
dang, Becca, that's a great.
Mhm.
And you're also a writer,
Yeah,
not just of nonfiction. You secretly write fiction
I do.
about under pen names, which is awesome.
One of which is my actual name, but
Do
yeah.
you write fiction under Becca Syme?
Under RL Syme, yeah, I write
Awesome.
mystery.
I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Interesting. Super fun. Okay, so we read together The Wedding Date by Jasmine
Yes.
Guillory. Um, Initial impressions. How did we like it?
I mean, this is one of my favorite books, so I'm so excited to talk about it.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I this was my first time reading it. So and maybe one of my first times reading a contemporary romance novel. So it was awesome.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So it was a big
Yeah,
deal
so
for me.
we specifically tried to pick books that we hadn't read in various genres, books that sort of became famous or were early huge books in the genre to try to figure out what they lent to that genre or how they signified it. And we've been wildly all over the place with some of our books. With this book, this is a more contemporary book.
Yeah.
Um, but I still think it really hits all the things when you think about what makes a romance a romance. I enjoyed it. I listened to it, which I don't generally do, but I really enjoyed that. I'm really trying to get into audiobooks, except that we're a couple weeks after we read it, and you can't just pick up the book and flip through to remind yourself of that thing. So if I forget some names or places, forgive me because it's been a few weeks since I read it. But yeah, overall thumbs up. I had a few minor issues here and there, but generally, I totally understand why people like a book like this, and I also enjoyed it.
Yeah. Becca, why is this one of your favorites?
It is really hard to pull off this trope in particular in a way that makes it feel real. And I think like I've read the whole series of books that this is the first of, right?
Yeah, it's,
So
it's the first of six, right? I think I
yeah.
read.
And
Yeah.
and one of the best books in the series, by the way, it came out not long ago, is the Royal Wedding book. It's
Okay.
not about the royal wedding, but I think it's called The Royal Holiday.
Hmm.
But it's about a man who works for the Queen of England and
Nice.
a woman who's connected to this family that we read about in this book, who goes over there to be with her daughter, who's marrying the prince, basically,
Super
of
fun.
England, and falls in love with a guy, spoiler alert, who works for the Queen, which is it is legitimately one of the best books that I've ever read before.
Oh,
I think it's better even than this one. The only reason I think so though is because it's farther into the series. And so I think like I enjoy all the world building and all that
Right.
stuff.
And
So
the characters get richer. I have a
yeah.
question for you. You said this trope, but one of the things I liked about this book is there seem to be like three, four, five tropes happening. So what
Yes.
specifically were you
The fake relationship trope.
the
It's
fake?
one of my
Yeah.
favorites. And granted, since we've all read it, we're gonna just assume spoilers,
Oh
right?
yeah.
oh,
Like
we're gonna spoil the
okay.
Yeah.
crap out
All
of this
right.
thing. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
not. Yeah, you should have read it before you turn this on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please, if you haven't read it yet, stop and go read it and then
yeah.
listen to the rest of this. But
We're gonna wreck it.
um yeah, we'll wreck it. But like a lot of really good books, I think she doesn't rely just on one trope for the whole book, because the fake relationship trope only lasts for about 2/3 of the book. And then, I mean, to be fair, it does sort of last the whole book. It's just, you know what's going to happen, right? Like at a
Yeah.
certain point, you know what's going to happen. But it is really hard to pull this one off in contemporary romance, fake relationship, in a way that feels realistic. And I think the reason it feels so realistic is the the reasons the characters can't just be together, right? Like, why can't you guys just talk about your crap? And why can't you just, solve this problem? Were really, really important reasons to them,
Mm.
right? Like, he has this backstory about his consistency in lack of commitment that make total sense why he would need a date to the wedding, and also where it couldn't just be any person, right? Like, all of the reasons made so much sense and worked well. Whereas I think a lot of fake relationships tropes can struggle to feel motivated effectively. But I felt like this one was just one of the best, in my opinion.
Yeah, I really enjoyed I came in skeptical because I read the like synopsis and I was like, okay, like how many times have I seen this? Like you're describing, I didn't know it was called fake relationship, but how many times have I seen the like pretend to be my date and then we'll fall in love? And the opening meet cute scene in the elevator is so well
It's
written.
so good.
It's so great that I
It's
was like
so good.
fully in.
Hmm.
Um, and the whole like looking for crackers in her purse, like it was fantastic. It was so well done. I was
Yeah.
super into it the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, do y'all have a favorite scene in the book?
Ooh, that is hard. That's hard because I would actually say some of my favorites are the ones that are much later.
Mm,
Like, as much as I love the meet cute and it was great, like, there's a scene, and I can't remember exactly where it falls, but there's a scene late in the book where they are just about to capitulate, right? Like, they're just about to say, I really like you and I'm really vulnerable in this situation, and they're just about to be totally honest with each other, and then they both kind of clam up a little bit, and I think they may
yeah.
be having sex during the scene, but you can feel that is like, she says something to him and then he kind of nods or does, like, a
Hmm.
sense to it, and then instead of talking about it, you're like, well, yeah, that would make sense. They're both tired, they're going to go to sleep, and then they kind of wake up the next morning and they don't carry the conversation all the way through,
Yeah.
so they can't have the resolution. And I'm just like, I just think every point of the, like, the actual romantic tension in the book is done so well.
Yeah. I know this scene you're talking about. I liked it. And
Mhm.
they do a good job of, I think in that scene, really playing off of the two characters' insecurities. Like they align well.
Yes.
Like the whole like I don't she's
Yes.
in the whole like I don't know if he actually likes me. I'm
Yes.
not the type of woman that he's usually with
Yep.
physically, and he's got the whole like I don't want to be vulnerable with another person thing going on, which
Yes.
plays out in that moment really, really well.
So good.
Yeah. Tom, did you have a favorite scene?
I like the scenes when she goes to his world. Is he in LA or where is he? She's in San Francisco, but
He's in
he's
LA, she's in San
He's in
he's
Francisco.
LA.
yeah. Uh Twice. I mean, both times she is thinking, I'm not going to fit in with these people, and he's thinking, what are these people going to think? And everyone around them is like, oh, you two are perfect for each other.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, not see, I don't know. And so like she goes to the hospital with him and totally like connects with
Mm,
his patient's mom. And then there's a scene where she goes to a party and they end
The
up having a
party.
huge fight, but she's actually, you know, there's just like at the wedding, there's one like racist guy, sexist guy, and everybody else is fine. And I sort of like the way she underplayed what could have been a major trope of him liking someone who doesn't fit in with his world. The
Yeah.
I think one of the things that was best about the book, but also one of my least favorite parts about the book, is that all of the conflict was personal. Um,
Right.
so it wasn't about his friends being assholes and him having to decide whether he's going to stand up for her or not. It wasn't, there was no villain.
Yeah,
There was
there are
no
a
villain
couple
in the book.
a-hole friends, but you're right. He's like
Yeah, but not many.
he's not any way
Yeah.
connected to them emotionally.
The and
He's like, I
so
hate that guy.
and so it's really about her lack of self-confidence and his lack of commitment. Those are the conflicts. And I felt like for me it bogged in the middle because it just kept coming back to the same conflicts. So but then the end was fantastic. And begin, the dialogue and all the characters set up in the beginning was just great, especially Alexa. She is delightful, and her
Yeah.
foibles are all delightful. But for me, they went on a bit too long. So about 75% into the book, I'm like, okay, come on, you know, okay, come on. So,
Yeah.
but it didn't, that's my most critical, and that's not very critical because I really enjoyed it.
Right, because they both kind of had that external conflict that wasn't really like it was external conflict, but it wasn't with each other, right? It
Right.
wasn't like it was kind of like the you weren't sure what would happen with her program and you weren't sure
Mm-hmm.
what would happen with his patient. But at the same time, like either one of those could have not worked out.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah,
conflict could
those
have
weren't like
gone
life and
the other
death.
way.
Like
Yeah.
if her program didn't work out, she's probably just going to start another one. Like that's kind of how I felt. Like,
Right. Or
yeah,
like she would quit. Yeah. Like she
yeah,
Yeah.
would quit and go work somewhere else. And
yeah.
so,
And then,
and that does happen a fair amount with contemporary
mhm,
romance
mhm.
novels, especially I would say this kind of more rom-com-y style, where the external conflict is kind of separate from each other.
Hmm.
So, and this is interesting, the fake relationship trope. If you've ever seen, I think it's called, I can't remember, I don't think it's called The Wedding Date, but it is Dermot Mulroney and
Julia
Deborah
Ross.
Messing.
It
Oh,
is called The
not my
Wedding
best
Date.
friend's wedding.
And
I
it's called The Wedding Date, and I was very
Oh,
confused because when I picked up
oh,
this book, I thought that's what I was reading. And I got
isn't
into
it
the
called The
first,
Wedding Date?
it's called The Wedding
Yeah,
Date. And I
I
got into
think
the
so.
first chapter and I was like, this is not the same
This is
book at
not the
all.
same book. Yeah, and it is a fake relationship trope, but it's really different, right? And
Yeah.
so in that particular book, because her family, just to Tom's point, her family is such a mess and they're so horrible.
Hmm.
And really her whole trajectory is or emotional trajectory is also related to the external conflict in that way. Like she has to solve how she feels about her sister and her
Hmm.
family and all that stuff. And in this particular book, it really separated those from each other. And so the external
yeah.
conflict wasn't as, yeah.
And I can see the benefit of that, wherein they both
Mhm.
have to overcome the thing that's keeping them from embracing this relationship, which have to do with themselves. So which is nice because it's not like the billionaire is going to fix me, right? It's about fixing yourself. The only problem with that, which is the problem with all romances, I think, is what I call the Harry met Sally syndrome, which is why are things different at the end? He still has insane jealousy issues. She still has self-confidence issues. Why at the end am I supposed to think that it's all going to be great?
And I will say,
Yeah, I would,
yeah, go
no,
ahead.
He's
go
got
I'm
some
ahead.
sorry.
issues, man.
No, no, you go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to say, I think this is probably where the nuance of the interpersonal relationship stuff happens, right? Because I would say, from a nuance perspective, I actually felt like she solved their problems in a way that was going to be more fixable for them in the future. In terms of like the external conflict didn't play into it at all. But she really learned, Alexa, in my opinion, really learned that it doesn't matter if you are unlike the people that he's been with before. Like you have to learn how to talk to yourself about who you are and what you bring to the table.
Hmm.
And you have to learn how to fix your own, your own insecurities. And I kind of feel like that's probably what a lot of good romance novels do. Not all romance novels are good, but I feel like the ones that are written well, they do sort of learn something in the process of going through all of this internal stuff. And I think what he learned, at least that I felt like this was the case, I think what he learned was there's never going to be a person that you won't worry is going to hurt you. Like
Mhm.
Yeah.
you can't wait for that person to magically appear. You have to take the risk with the person. And just from a psychological perspective, I think that's the most accurate way that internal conflict plays out is you sort of have to face the black moment of what I'm looking for is complete certainty. What I'm going to have to do is be brave, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the thing they have to get over. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah. No, I
I found myself thinking like because I was again weary coming into a modern romance book because you hear all the like you know, I think stereotypes around them that's like, they solve all their problems by the end of the book and everybody's perfect and everybody walks away.
Right.
I was really good at the end of this one being like, no, no, I don't need them to be perfect. They're like they seem to be starting something and I'm happy for that. Like they both seem to like you're saying, have started to learn something about themselves. And I'm good with that. I was like,
I
yeah, this is great.
I think if as an editor, if I were advising somebody, I would say this works perfectly if you're going to write a second book, which is more focused on him and perhaps jealousy issues. Because I thought she progressed more than he did, and I thought he made great strides on commitment and fear of commitment. But he had a whole host of other issues, including anger, uh, including denial, and especially like she just keeps throwing Theo in there just to make him nuts, and it's not a good look. Like
Yeah, he needs to go to therapy.
there's no point where he makes fun of himself or he says, "Oh, I was," and I just at the end of the book I was like, she's come a long way and he's come a little way, which could be okay if there's more. But my understanding is each book is a different set of characters, right? Like one of the books is
They
Carlos,
are.
and one of the yeah, so which
Yeah,
is
you'll
great.
see her sister, you'll see,
Yeah,
Mhm.
like you see
I
other
love that.
people.
Yeah.
That's a
Uh,
really interesting point too, because I hadn't thought about that. It Now I need to go back through some of my favorite romance novels and see if that is the case, because I would say that may be fairly typical of
Mm.
romance novels where like one character will progress more than the other. One character's
mhm.
um issues kind of holds up the tension in the novel a little more than the other one. But it is always possible too that part of the reason that didn't hit a flag for me at all is because it is more normal for one character to get more
Mm.
developed than the other one. That's
Right,
really
but they
interesting.
but they didn't get more of the narrative. Well, they got a little bit more of the narrative, but it switched to him quite a bit, so it wasn't all through
Yeah.
Alexis.
Yeah, I also liked about the change since we're talking about character change for Alexa. I liked that they didn't Jasmine Guillory didn't put her on a diet or like we didn't go
Yep.
through the whole like she has to fix herself.
Right.
It was more about
Yep.
self-acceptance for who she
Yeah.
was. I really appreciated that. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked that it wasn't even a thing. You know what I mean? Like for
Yeah.
him, he never commented on it. He wasn't part of the problem. I think it was really realistic in that way in terms of it just again being a bigger girl in relationships. Like that is the goal.
Yeah.
You don't look for somebody who wants you to change yourself in order to be acceptable to them. You look for somebody who likes you the way you are, and then you work on yourself to become the person who accepts yourself. And I think, and that may be part of um, why I like this book and other books like it so
Mm.
much is just that I think it's really realistic to what it's actually like to be on the inside of
Mm.
somebody who has that kind of backstory.
Yeah, and I really felt it from her. I think
Yeah,
that her inner dialogue is great. I was
that's so
really
good.
I really felt like it was interesting, like to see her. Like, there's one scene, one of my favorite scenes is when she goes to a barbecue with his friends, and she has this great scene where she meets all of his ex-girlfriends at one time, which is fantastic. And it was interesting that none of them vocally or even like visibly seem to judge her, but you still get this running monologue where she's constantly comparing herself to everybody in the room. And I really felt like pain for her in that part
Yeah.
of the story. I was like, this is hard to read for her because it's like a tough, she's even though no one's saying anything to her, she's like so self-conscious you can just feel it kind of radiating off of her. I thought it was really well done. Um, Yeah. Any
Yeah.
others? Oh, go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I also thought that, and again, this is coming from a white middle-aged New Englander, way the way race was dealt with, I thought was really interesting and good, and I totally believed her as a realistic person having those thoughts. And I don't know if they're true. I don't know how mainstream her thoughts are, she's an outlier, but it wasn't all encompassing. It wasn't taking over her, just like ideas of size and such. It was just one of many factors. And I thought it was balanced well. And it all took a back seat to her own self-consciousness, which was her main, her main thing to overcome. And so I thought that was interesting, and not and handled well. Again, coming from my not very well informed background, but
Yeah, I agree. I loved the way she treated the issues. Just in general, I think because I because I've had the experience of being a woman who is a bigger girl. So the way that she portrayed that was so accurate. I was just like, everything else resonated because it was like I understood that character, and there's something about that emotional truth telling that when you believe someone about one thing, like I can empathize with you, I understand this thing, and then everything else about them just makes sense to me, right?
it
Like
gives
when she
currency,
talks about
right?
it, it does, it totally
It
gives
gives
currency.
currency.
And I appreciated that it wasn't absent, but I
Mhm.
also appreciate, because I think that would have felt to me like that probably wasn't true if it was just completely absent. But I also, and again, speaking only about the size and the weight issues, because when Jeff was describing that scene, it's interesting that having heard inner monologues of many different types of women around issues like this, I would be willing to bet that the people who were looking at her were just as self-conscious about her beauty and her
Oh.
presence and
Mhm.
her body and all these other things as she was about hers in relationship to them. And I think what's been interesting about just the body positivity movement in general is the open dialogue about some of these things. But I was personally, that was the issue that I was the most worried to talk about, just because there is a fundamental lack of empathy just in the general world about what it's like to live on the inside of somebody else's, experience. And
Mhm.
so it's really kind of cool to hear, two men talk about this issue in a way that feels validating, because that's a really big deal.
And I think
Yeah.
it really worked. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just gonna say it is a one of the other things I love that the author does in this is like I'm a big guy and I actually get called big guy all the time. My wife and I joke about it. Like it's shocking to me the number of men that walk up to me. Sometimes they'll even be like 6'5". They're like towering over me. And they're like, "Hey, big guy." And I'm like, "All right." But it's just a funny thing that
That never happens to me.
it happens to me all the time. And I'm 6 foot, but I'm not like hugely tall. People that like tower over me because I'm wider and because I carry a lot of weight, they walk up to me like, "Hey, big guy." And like there's always an assumption, I think, in when books write heavier characters that they have some kind of issue with food.
Right.
And part of what I loved about how Jasmine Guillory wrote Alexa is she delights in food. And I'm that way.
Mhm.
I love to cook. I love to eat. Like this is something that like I don't like I have a friend who's like food is only fuel for me. And I'm always like, you're missing so much joy in life. Like food is amazing. I love it. Like so, for me, I love that like there's like a real celebration of like cuisine that is I also think very Californian. Like they're talking about food trucks, they're talking about like, donuts and churros and like all these things that are like, and I love that. I was like, I related to that in a very like personal way. I was like, yeah, if you get me talking about like my favorite whatever food, like I had a burrito in New York yesterday. I could literally talk to you about it for like 30 minutes. Like it was the best freaking burrito I've ever had. And my 14-year-old was standing next to me. He had a quesadilla, and we literally just sat there and talked about how much
You
we
have a
love the
shirt on
food.
that says tacos on
I
it.
do have a
Like
Yeah,
show
I
that
I
I
says
do too.
believe
tacos.
you. Yes.
But so like I loved that about I
I
thought,
love that.
just to add to what you're saying about the character, I thought not just the body positivity, but also the like, we're gonna lean into, I think, the like, not everybody has to live and die in the diet culture. Like
Yeah.
these two characters can lean into like enjoyment of things and actually bond over them, right? Like bond over the like, yeah. Anyway, I love that part of it.
And you pointed out the women at the barbecue, none of them were being judgy. The only judgy person is the sister at the wedding, who's just like a horrible person, who I expected, again, with the sort of lack of villain, I expected her to be the big bad, right? I thought there was gonna be some sort of thing where she manipulates him into bed, or something. There's gonna be some sort of massive conflict, which there really wasn't. She really focused on the uh, interior conflict and growth,
Yeah,
which
there
is
is.
interesting. And I that's not normal for romance, is it? I mean, or is it?
I think
Uh,
there's a type of romance novels that are like this, and I would
mhm.
call them the gray moment romances, right? Where I don't know if it's a rom-com designation or not, because I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I've read books two, three, and four. But I'm I feel like there is a certain writers are really good at character development, and they're really good at making you see, because what is essentially in romance novels, there's all these arcs, right? It's like you have a change arc, you have a romance arc, you have an internal character arc for and an outer character arc, right? Like there's all these arcs. And if you're going to write a book that has an internal arc as the primary architecture,
Mhm.
you have to be so good at the nuance of internal development. You have to be able to show emotional progress and then emotional regress and emotional progress and regress in like these minute areas. And very few writers can do it as well as she did it. And the people who do it as well as she does it are writing those books where you don't see as much external plot. You see a lot more internalizing and growth as a result, which I think there are some that are similar, but it's not like I wouldn't say it's characteristic of the whole
Right.
genre.
Which I like, I guess, because my experience with romance would be more with movies where they have to have the
Yeah,
external
because
big
you don't have
bad, the person who
access.
lies and causes everyone to have a misunderstanding, or the grand gesture, or whatever it is, because you have to have that. Uh, Also, to make all that work that you were talking about is the sort of internal monologue versus external dialogue, and so maybe we should talk about the dialogue because the dialogue was really great.
So
Yeah,
good.
I think before we get there though, because I do want to talk about the dialogue. Before we get there, I just want to say something else she does that I loved. That again, Becca, you can be our authority on romance since you've got like 1,000 times much more experience than Tom and I do. The sex scenes were like a beautiful extension of their internal vulnerabilities that I was really
Yes.
impressed by. I was like, these are very hot and steamy sex scenes, but they're like they are a natural extension of their internal monologue, which I was like, this is really great. Yeah.
Yes, the best romance writers make the sex scenes relevant to the story.
Mm,
So, like through the sex scene, you learn something about yourself or you express a part of your internal, and some of the sex scenes in some books are part of the external conflict, right?
mm,
Like it just depends on which book you're reading. But they need the sex in order to grow, like, and specifically in order to either grow closer or in order sometimes to split apart, because sometimes
mm,
like in a lot of romance novels, there's a trajectory of like 50% of the way through, you're going to hit a sex scene, right?
mhm,
That's a normal percentage. So sometimes you have the kind of rug pull that happens after the sex scene where they may have been really vulnerable and emotional in that space. But as soon as they wake up the next morning, it's like, now we have to pull apart because something happened. So I think there's a lot of like in really good romance novels, the sex scenes are not just there,
mm.
they're actually part of the story. They're a necessary, you can't skip them. You need
Yeah,
them.
Yeah, it was great to see like it was almost like the character's best version of themselves got previewed in the sex scenes. And then
100%.
like the sex scene ends and I'm like, I want them to be those people in the next conversation. And then they
And
get up
then
in the
they
morning
can't
and they're
be.
not. And
It
I'm
can't
like,
be.
have
Yeah.
have more sex. You're better when you're having sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Just
was.
jump
Yeah,
back
There,
in there again.
yeah.
Yeah.
there was also something that I thought very important that happened. There's one scene where uh, he wants to keep the light on, and that speaks directly to her
Mhm.
self-consciousness, and it helps her overcome her self-consciousness. To realize that like he is not seeing her the way she is seeing herself is sort of an important realization for her. So that was another way where the
Yes.
sex scene was really tied into the sort of emotional growth arc.
Yes, and it's so like it's just so true to life in terms of like if you know anything about internal psychology of people who struggle with like getting past certain issues, right? There is so much truth to this like you become very vulnerable and then you're sad that you were vulnerable because you can't believe it, right? Like just it happening one time doesn't change everything about your whole life. So I noticed that, and it really bothered me actually. I noticed that there were some reviews on the Goodreads page that were like complaining about the misunderstanding piece of like, or that they wouldn't just talk to each other. And I was
Mhm.
like, I don't think we read the same book because it made complete sense to me
Yeah.
that like they would be on the edge of communicating and then one of their vulnerabilities would creep in and then they would pull back, right? Or
Yeah.
like they'd have this amazing closeness, like we were talking about during that one sex scene. It was like they're almost there. They are so close to just being completely truthful and honest with each other. And then they wake up and it's like they both retreat to their corners again. And that feels like the most honest to real life relationship ever. And it's so it just rings true, I guess. So like it I feel like it was I just love this book. I love it.
Yeah.
I can't
You,
stop.
you know what I think would have underlined that stronger for me is a little bit more of Alexa's romantic history. Like, has she been
Yes.
burned a couple times? And that didn't really, if there was mention of it, I like with her friend or something, I don't
I
have that
don't
much
remember
recall.
it.
But that I think that would have underlined a little bit
I
more.
agree.
Yeah, they
Um,
kind of paint, I think her sister kind of paints her at some point as like, you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of relationships. And that's
yeah.
kind of where they leave it. Like that's the
Mhm.
extent of what they, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved going back to what you're saying about the dialogue, Becca. I found that like I liked their inability to communicate verbally, like to because the running in a inner monologue is really deep. And if a writer ever wants to know how to write inner monologue, this is going to be one of my examples from now on. To be like, hey, go look at this book because the inner monologue is treated like its own character, like
Yeah.
it's like a voice in the thing in each scene. But there, part of me was like, because at one point I was like, man, they're terrible communicators. And I realized like halfway through the book, I was like, if they were good communicators, there wouldn't be a relationship here because they'd both be in different relationships before they ever meet, right? Like the fact that they're
Yep.
damaged actually makes the relationship possible in this
Yes.
moment. And I thought it was done really well in the switching of POVs, like they're smooth transitions between the two voices it was really masterfully done. I was really impressed by that. Yeah. Yeah.
Although from an audio point, it would have been better to have a male narrator or some sort of break because there was no on the audio there was no notification that you were switching
Mm,
POVs. I'm sure in the book there was a gap, um, but she would just stop talking as Alexa internal monologue and start looking at and I figured it out, but a
That
few
is
times
true.
it was a little jarring. My favorite dialogues were Drew and Carlos because they just
Yes.
like the lack of intermodal, which was great. With like, you're an asshole. Stop bothering me. You're an asshole. When are you going to do this? Shut up. And it was just it was great because I could visualize Carlos like I love this guy, but man, when is this going to stop? Like he is just like had it with Drew, and it just comes across so plain in his dialogue. It's great. You don't need Carlos's inner thoughts to know exactly how he's feeling. I thought all of those scenes that were just the two of them together were great.
Yeah, and the one where Carlos comes to Drew's place when she's there.
And
Like
he won't leave.
when that was
It's
phenomenal.
perfect.
Like
Yeah.
it was so good.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
She really, the author really nails, I think. Like I have a couple guy friends that I've been friends with for like over 20 years. And I felt like she nails that
Oh yeah.
dynamic where like we fully know each other's shit. Like there's nothing hidden between us anymore, and we fully call each other out on it all the time. And it's sometimes in a like direct way, but more 9 times out of 10, we just know how to poke each other in a like.
Yes.
I just know that he really wants to be alone with this girl right now. So I'm going to sit down on the couch and make myself extremely comfortable. And I'm going to go get
Yeah.
a beer and like open up a
And get a
beer.
beer.
Yeah, just to let everybody know I'm not leaving anytime soon, knowing that that's like driving him crazy and finding like some enjoyment in it. I think it was super
It was
realistic.
so great.
Yeah, Carlos was my favorite character. I could have read Carlos all day.
Well,
Um,
Carlos has a book. You should read Carlos's book because
oh,
his
really?
I think it might even be next. I think it might be
Okay,
book two.
number two. I
But
will. I don't typically read like
Or
further books in a series
yeah.
because my to read list is so long, but I will actually go read these because these were really
I
fun.
was looking at, I think one of the books is Theo and Alexa's best friend. Can't
mhm.
remember her name. Is it Monica or something like that? What was her friend's name, the designer?
Oh, I can't
Oh, I don't
remember.
remember.
But yes, it's Theo is one of them. Theo, by the way, I loved Alexa and Theo.
Hmm.
Even though even though I think they set in Drew's mind, they set Theo up as a third, like as a third love triangle person. I never ever got that sense between the two of them, like between
No,
Alexa and Theo, which I liked a lot. I think there's a danger in having that guy best friend in a romance novel where there's a chance you might like Theo better than Drew. And so you always have just a tiny bit of danger with including a guy best friend. But I thought she did a great job with that one.
yeah. I
Well, and
did
nice
kind of
that he.
like Theo better than Drew though.
Well, we don't. I didn't feel like we really saw enough of Theo, but
Yeah,
it
we
was
didn't
not.
get to know Theo
That's
enough,
true.
but yeah,
He wasn't gay, which is a nice. That's a trope that they often
Yeah, they do.
like. The best friend is gay and therefore not a threat. Um,
Oh, like
he.
not a threat to the love
to the
triangle.
love
Yeah.
That's true.
triangle. Yeah, and
Right.
that's
Yeah.
usually the big
They
reveal. Is like,
they do that a lot.
oh, you don't have to worry about him. He's gay, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah. I like that she didn't do that. Yeah,
Yeah. And Carlos too. Like Carlos also potentially being a love interest for her,
hmm,
but not being for her, I
yeah,
thought was really good. I think so much of what she did well was the nuance of the relationships, like being able to tell there was a difference between how Alexa felt about
hmm,
Drew from the beginning than she felt about anyone else. So you knew that was the right guy for her. And I like that a lot.
I love that. Any other scenes before we talk about like anything we struggled with? Any other scenes we liked? Anything else that stood out to you as like this was really well done, or that we haven't talked about yet?
Hmm.
No. Um, I'll say this
I
too.
may come back to that.
I this is the one of the reasons I don't read romance is because, as an editor, I've had to study the tropes and like the order they're
Right.
supposed to come in and like what the structure of a romance book is supposed to take. So I'm always like, I don't need to read that. I know what's going to happen. I knew it was going to happen at every stage of the book, and I was still all in. I loved it. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I understand this now. Like I'm totally here for
You
this.
are
Yeah.
now a romance reader, Jeff, because that's how we all are. And this is maybe why I can't really describe it because it's like, yeah, I absolutely know in a fake relationship what will happen at the end, right? Like I know in any
Yeah.
romance novel, the two of them are going to end up together.
Yeah. And
But
I knew the
how
grand
they
gesture was
get
coming. I
there.
was like, there's a grand
Yeah.
gesture coming.
You
Yeah.
know the grand gesture's coming, but how they get there is the thing for me, especially like having read probably 1,000 fake relationship books. I like most of them. It's one of my
Mm,
favorite tropes just because I know exactly what they're going to do, but when they surprise me, and still there's that moment of like, you have to be on the inside of how they're feeling, and then you get that trajectory as well, which is why we read. those
Yeah, I
books.
think I really found that like, I want to see these characters succeed and grow. You
Be
attach
happy.
me to the character. I know the path they're on. Like it's almost like watching
Yeah.
a roller coaster. Like I know I've seen the roller coaster from the outside. I know what the roller coaster looks like. I know logically all of the twists and turns it's going to take, but I really want to feel it in those characters' skin.
Yeah.
Take those twists and turns. Yeah, I was impressed by that. I was like, oh, I'm starting to understand this now. Yeah.
From a craft standpoint, that's actually harder, right? So
Mhm.
surprising but inevitable for mysteries and thrillers is where you want to be, but not surprising and inevitable is extremely hard to pull off.
Yeah.
And like I think the only surprise in there was I thought it was really great that she doubled up the grand gesture with the sister also showing up,
Yeah.
Mhm.
who on the phone had been like, "Oh, it's no big deal," and then they hang up, and clearly it was a big deal because she flies all the way to San
Mhm.
Francisco to give
I
testimony.
love that.
So that was a nice surprise because after the first couple chapters, I was like, "Boy, the sister just disappeared." So it was nice to bring her back
Yeah.
in at the
Put
end
it back
because
at the end.
I it's like, where did that character go? So because there weren't a lot of characters in the book, frankly.
Yeah.
Is that typical for romance? There was
I would say,
not a
yeah,
lot.
you're probably not going to get like a cast of 20, right? Like
Mhm.
you're probably going to have more like eight pretty consistent characters.
Interesting. Yeah. Anything about the book that we didn't like that we wish had been a little bit different? If we say no, this is the first book back in our series where we haven't had like, okay.
I mean, for me, I wouldn't change anything. But after Tom said that about like Drew, I would love to see some deleted chapters of like Drew's post book.
Hmm.
How is he gonna kind of be in that trajectory of like fully healing? Because when he gets there at the end, I trust that he's gonna go on that journey. And maybe that's the difference is like I know his journey's not over, but I
Hmm.
trust he's going to go on that journey because he cares enough about her that he wants to show up different than he's been in other relationships. But I would love to see it just because I would love to see her get to experience that feeling of like
Hmm.
knowing and trusting that they're going to really be okay together.
Yeah, and she jumps ahead so that you can see that it's been a year and they're still together,
Yeah.
and so you just have to sort of trust. But I wasn't necessarily buying it necessarily in terms of that he didn't have a lot more work to do. That doesn't mean they couldn't have a fabulous relationship, but uh,
Yeah, I think I'm like both of you. I wouldn't change anything about what was written. I think it's beautiful. I think I would have liked to have had a scene where Drew actively rejects a woman's advances. He doesn't do that. That I remember. Maybe he does,
Oh.
but I didn't remember him actively being like, "No, I'm in a relationship right now." And part of me he's kind of like internally, constantly rejecting the temptation to go for a jog with this woman that like is super hot and he's going to jog with. But that's an internal rejection of like, I'm not going to do that. I have a possibility, but I'm not going to do it. We never get the scene of like, him angry going out to a bar and getting hit on and then having to be like, you know what? No, I'm not doing this. I
yeah,
I wanted a little more
or
character
yeah,
growth in that way. Yeah.
or worse, giving into temptation, and that you know what I mean? Because you see that in a lot of character arcs too, where like things that they really screw up bad.
I don't
Uh,
know that I would have forgiven him. If he'd given in
yeah,
to temptation, I don't know that I would have been like, you don't deserve Alexa.
You
uh,
When you
shouldn't.
go away.
yeah.
Yeah.
The
You shouldn't.
the
It's
the sister from the wedding comes on to him, but at that point he's still thinking that the thing with Alexa is not real. So
yeah,
he
it's
says
not
no,
a real, it's not a
but
real
it's not
like
a
it's not
yeah.
a rejection of like potential romance because of Alexa. It's a rejection of potential romance because y'all are really
The chick is
messy.
annoying.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't like you people.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
yeah.
terrible.
I saw
Yeah,
this
and I would
really, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I would still, despite all this conversation, which has really deepened how I think about it, I still find a little bit of a drag about 75% of the way through that I would goose or tighten in some way, but that's very, very minor critique for what was a really, really great book.
Yeah, it was so fantastic. But I agree. Like, I think it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if the sister from the ex's sister would have played a
Yeah.
larger role or something like that. I think there was potential there for sure, but it just depends on what it is that she show about their growth, like their character growth.
Hmm.
But I was gonna say I saw this just to kind of highlight that what you two were talking about Drew's character. I saw this really incredible TikTok video once about a guy who was trying to process with his wife whether or not he would find someone who was better than her in the future, right? Like
Huh.
before he got married, he was having cold feet about whether or not he would ever find someone who was quote unquote better than his wife. And his wife was like, "Oh, well, that's easy. Of course you will. Like, of course you're going to find somebody who's younger or hotter or, etc. But the point is that when you choose, you choose. Like,
Yeah.
that's your, and then you choose me every day." And so I feel like to that point, just this is something we don't see a lot in romance novels. We don't see what happens after they get together, and we
Hmm.
don't see that sense of like, yeah, you're gonna be angry and be at the bar someday, and you're gonna see some hot girl you actually do want to be with that you're gonna have to say no to because you commit to me and you choose our relationship. And I think that's probably a general critique of the romance genre, just
Hmm.
as a rule that you could probably extend. You're probably not going to see those scenes unless they happen in future books. So she may still intend to write more of those books at some point.
Hmm.
She's continuing to write in that series. She could write a scene someday where Drew rejects somebody at the bar with Alexa in a future book, but it won't happen in their arc because the story usually ends with commitment,
Yeah.
right? Which,
And it is
you
a
know,
darker, like I think about the scene you're describing, the like I choose every day. I think the best version of it I've seen is in not the book by Nick Hornby, but the movie High Fidelity with John Cusack. There's an amazing scene at the end where he sits the girl down that he's like treated horribly and like is trying to come back to. And he starts his little speech with, I just wanted to come and tell you I'm tired of the fantasy. And it's like there's a beautiful speech he gives, but it is not like, I would say, highly emotionally charged like the start
right.
of a relationship is. The start of a relationship is always like super emotionally charged and exciting.
Yeah, it's a roller
It's
coaster.
it's a roller
Yeah.
coaster. It's not a roller coaster scene. It's like a hey, I've been living in this fantasy of a roller coaster and it is not real and I'm acknowledging that it's not real. And there's this weird fantasy I have that I'm always going to find the better person, but you're actually my person. And I'm sick of pretending to be in this fake fantasy. And the scene's great in the movie because she looks back at him and she goes, "Thanks for telling me that." It's just a like perfect, like, long-term couple having a serious conversation of like, he's like pouring his heart out and she's like, "Yeah, I appreciate you saying this to me." But but like there's no fuzzy like view around. There's no like fuzzy lens on it. Like it's just would imagine that would be really hard in a romance book where people are coming for the emotional roller coaster to pull off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that would probably be a downer of the, yeah.
Yeah, the epilogue is cannot be Drew going out to the bar 3 years later
That's right.
after a fight, you know?
Yeah. Carlos going to get him and be like, "What are you doing?" Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't work well. Yeah. It can't
But
be
I'll tell you
Drew
what,
like spotting a hot nurse in the
Yeah.
hallway and being like, "Hey, yeah."
but
But see, I would.
romance novelists may want to think about this though, because honestly, that would be great content for the newsletter. I would absolutely pay money for Jasmine Guillory to write a this deleted scene
Yeah.
about Drew and Alexa 10 years later and the sort of like I choose you every day thing, right? Like I do,
Hmm.
because the characters in these really great books still live in our brains. And so why not continue to give us content from them?
Oh, yeah.
Because the book does end in the middle of the roller coaster. All romance novels
Yeah.
really end there.
Yeah, and I'm not a romance reader, but I would totally read a book about like 10 years in the future, Drew and Jasmine. Not Drew, Jasmine's the other. Drew and Alexa, and
Alexa.
Alexa being like super stressed at work because like the political campaign isn't going bad, and her not being at home as much, and Drew being like tempted by some, hot young nurse that like spends all her time with him, and having them like having to choose each other in this moment of
That's a
chaos.
Nick Sparks book.
I'd
Like that's a
totally read
Nicholas
that book.
Sparks
Yeah,
book.
it's a Nick Hornby book. It's
And
the
Yes.
yeah.
and see, I would have put that scene at the 75% mark where instead of him just deciding this is the I mean he sort of just decides with a bit of prompting from Carlos. Like he sort of decides to make a change, which is great. But I want to see him come down lower before he makes that change, where he's just about to do something really irreversible, and he's like, "What am I doing? What am I doing?" But
Yeah.
uh, because if it was a critique for me, it was that they kept, as you said so well, they were coming near and then dancing back and then coming near and then dancing back and coming, and it happens, and then finally they come near and they stay near.
Mhm.
But I didn't feel like there was a huge thing that happened to push them over that edge. They just sort of got there. They just sort of grew, which is again great. But uh, I think I'm used to more dramatic uh, plot.
Like you want a black moment.
I
I want a
do. I
black
want
moment.
I
Yeah.
want a Dark Night of the
Yeah.
Soul
Yeah.
for Drew, and he had it, but nothing really prompted it. It just sort of
Yeah.
finally occurred to him that he was blowing this.
Yeah. I'm a thriller writer. I need somebody to die in the middle of the book. Yeah.
He needs to
No,
die.
yeah. Somebody
Uh,
like somebody needs to be shot in the middle. No, it
Because
was
that's how we learn, right? We
that's
always
how we
learn when
learn.
people
yep.
are,
We
yeah,
only learn when our friend is killed. And then
yeah.
Okay, good
That's the
place to
most
wrap up.
thriller writer thing you've said all day long.
okay, if you were going to questions that we ask always at the end, if you were going to have dinner with one of the characters of this book, who would it be? And why?
Ooh, Alexa. I mean, easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would hang out with her for days, and I
Yeah.
think I would love it.
Yeah, me too. I would totally take Alexa out just to hang out,
She'd be a
just to chat.
blast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she'd be so much fun. And I want all of her food recommendations.
I was
So I
gonna
would
say I do
100%
Alexa
do that.
because I would say Alexa because we'd have donuts,
Yeah. I have
and I'm
no
a huge
interest in hanging out with Drew. I have no desire to
huge
hang out with
donut.
Drew at all.
Yeah,
Oh, a huge donut freak.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, same. Although I will say, if we were asking questions, one of the interesting ones, because she was such a sprinkles girl, right? Like she says, I hate donuts with sprinkles. So I'm like, okay, what's your donut of choice? If you're eating a
Mm.
donut, what's the one you're eating?
Oh, good question. My go-to is a Boston cream. I'm a like, what can you do inside the donut that surprises me? So like that's my go-to. But I like weird creativity in donuts. I had one recently that had like hot sauce in the middle,
Ooh.
and I was here for that. I mean,
Have you been to
I put
Voodoo?
hot sauce in my coffee. I put hot sauce in everything. I haven't been to Voodoo. No, I live on the East Coast, so we don't get Voodoo over here.
You should go to Voodoo sometime because that's what they are so good at. What
Okay.
about you, Tom?
See,
What's yours?
false dichotomy because you have two donuts. One is a cakey donut, like something like a chocolate with a glaze,
You
and
don't
then
get to change the rules of the question.
the other is clearly like a jelly filled donut or a light donut with like a maple glaze
Ooh,
on it.
Okay.
So no need to choose. We have a place
nice.
here, it's a local indie place called Lovebirds, which is also vegan. And it seems like the way you get away with being vegan is you just triple the sugar. Uh, and
It's
they're so
100%.
good. But they all have some sort of decoration on top or some crazy filling or something. So you would like it, Jeff. But
Nice.
I like that.
before we go, can we make
Well,
sure
wait,
that
I want to hear Becca's donut.
Oh, apple fritter. Like that's
Oh,
easy.
nice.
Like
Yeah, I'm here
see
for an apple
changing the
fritter.
rules also?
yes,
Yeah,
apple fritter is really like if I had to choose only one donut to eat for the rest of my life and I could never
nice.
have another one ever, it would be that one.
Yeah, yeah,
And the
that's a good
glaze.
one.
I mean, they all have apple fritters are great because of the glaze.
So good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fantastic. Um, all right, Becca, we ask every guest the last question that we usually surprise you with. Uh, in addition to this book, what books would you recommend readers check out?
Don't have to be romance.
Doesn't have
Oh,
to
I
be
was gonna say
romance.
if you're looking for books like in terms of like in this genre, I would do Bet Me by Jenny Cruzy. And really anything by Jasmine or Jenny Cruzy, I think are both excellent. And then just like who my favorite writer is, like what book would I read?
Mhm.
What I've read everything she's ever written is Leon Moriarty.
Okay.
Um, I've read every one of her books. I just saw she has a new book out. It's on my TBR for tomorrow. I cannot wait.
Awesome. I haven't
But I
read either
love
of
Leon.
those, so I'm excited to get into that. That's great.
Okay, with Leon Moriarty, given if you like the thriller-ish type of book, start with I'm gonna forget the title. I'll look it up and send it to you, but it's about a woman who loses her memory at the gym.
Hmm.
And I think
Okay.
it's called Eleanor. I think it has the word Eleanor in the title.
Okay.
I'll send it to you. It's maybe the best book that I've read.
Oh, that's
Um,
high praise.
yeah, it was phenomenal.
I'm here for that. Yeah, I'm gonna read that next. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this with us.
Yeah, this
Um,
was fun.
yeah.
Yeah, I just want to be sure you let people know uh, what you do because I find it
Thanks,
fascinating.
Tom.
I have all my Clifton strengths here in case it came
Oh,
up,
you
but it did.
do.
Of course I
Wait,
do.
what are your top five?
Oh, it's hilarious. Are you ready? Uh, my top five are where'd they go?
Not organization. I'm
No,
just
yeah,
teasing.
they
I'm
are.
totally teasing
Uh,
you, Tom.
no, oh, it signed me out. That's what it was. Uh, five of my top six are green, which
Oh, yeah, I was like,
surprises me not at all.
yeah, because you work at a
Uh,
bookstore, right? Like you're
yeah,
a bookseller.
and
Yeah.
I'm an editor and I'm a
Like
writer.
input learner, strategic intellection,
Yeah.
etc.
What's fun, what I think is great is that Jeff's are also mostly green, but they're none of the same green,
Yeah, we're
which is
very different
fascinating.
Oh.
greens.
And then my blue, I have one blue, which is number five, which is individualization, which also makes perfect sense because I really like
Yes.
editing and each story being different that I work on and not doing the same thing
Yes,
over.
and the fact that you picked out that Drew was less developed than Alexa.
Yeah,
Like it really would take an individualization person to notice that because you would kind of be anticipating what was going to happen and like what his best.
right.
This is why
Each
I
character, right?
yeah, like what would his best character arc kind of be? Is why
Yeah,
I almost picked Drew when you asked the question about who would you hang out with.
Hmm.
Not because I would want to spend time with him, but because I would want to be a therapist for him. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like I
Yeah,
would want to kind of be like, okay, bro, how are you?
yeah,
Like,
he
are
could
you
yeah.
use some
okay?
strengths coaching. He could
Yeah, he
So
use
could
some
use some
he
strengths
could
coaching.
totally use some strength coaching.
He could.
So I have intellection, input, analytical, learner, individualization, ideation, focus, command, responsibility, activator.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's funny because I hear the individualization in your answers, but the analytical and individualization are very similar to each other. It's just that one is about people and one is about sort of data and thoughts. Um, but yeah, I can hear that. I bet that's part of what would make you really be attracted to editing because you can also pick at the places where they're missing parts of the trajectory, which
I'm
is hard.
Yeah, I'm the person who goes to the museum and has to get close enough to see the brushstrokes
Yeah.
and goes to the concert and wants to be close, not for adoration, but because I want to see what foot pedals they're using.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, very much. When I took Clifton, I was like, oh well, I'm trying to learn something new about myself, but so far I've just learned everything I already know.
You everything you already know. Well,
So I
but
need to do coaching with you so
you know
that
what's
I can.
interesting though is it's really, really hard for dominant individualization people to learn new things about themselves. And part of this is because like so Dr. Clifton was top five individualization. And it was one of the things that made him see all the patterns in everybody. And that's part of because as an individualization, you can see how each person is different from everybody else. And his thing was, I can see the patterns. And also, I think there's a larger pattern to how everyone is similar and different. But it's really hard to teach individualization people things about themselves because they notice so much already.
Yeah, and I'm so
Fascinating.
damn defensive. Uh, which I
Do you
know.
have individualization too, Becca? Is that one of your
Yeah,
top
I do.
five? Okay.
Yeah,
And
it
you're
is.
coaching individual
Yeah, which makes total sense,
people, which
right?
Yeah.
makes
And
perfect
Yeah, it's
sense.
funny.
But for me,
It's my number two. So it's
yeah,
funny that all three
it
of
oh,
us
makes
are.
yeah, it
that
Yeah.
makes
so makes
total
sense.
sense.
Yeah. It's
But
really funny.
the place where Clifton Strengths really helped me was as a career path of trying to move away from retail to editing and not really understanding why, except that I've been doing one forever. But it's, largely because retail is the same people. I mean, you have different conversations, but it's uh, you're not really connecting with people. I can when I do, I can, and which is fun. Like I meet people from all over the world, frankly, and have some good conversations, but they're fleeting.
Mhm.
And digging into somebody's book is so much fun.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
a better use of the talent, frankly. Like it's a better use of the talent as an individualization to be doing something that has more of a relational capacity rather than transactional.
okay, so if you're listening, this is exactly what Becca does. She if you
yeah.
and can do it for you too. Where do they find you,
So
Becca?
betterfasteracademy.com is the easiest place. I always tell people if you heard something and you want to know more, don't go to the website. Go to YouTube and listen to the Quitcast videos for writers because we do so much like individualizing a process for writers, trying to help people understand why they're not having the success that they want or how they could be more of what they are. So yeah, the YouTube channel is probably the best, the Quickcast.
Awesome.
Yeah. I can recommend your coaching. I did a coaching session with you, must have been over a year ago. And,
Yeah.
and then, and I was at the time very much at war with like one of my top five and like really, really struggling. And then I did 4 sessions with one of your team and he was fantastic. It was great. I came out super changed. It was really good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Terry's great. And
Yeah, he was
the
amazing.
other piece too, just because Jeff, when we did it, I can't remember what it was that we were recording for. I think it must have been your podcast.
Mhm. It was the
So
Dialogue
Jeff,
Doctor podcast. Yeah.
yeah, it was a dialogue doctor. Jeff is dominant context, like has high
Yeah,
context.
it's number three.
And no kidding, told me the story of my life from like beginning to end and went, I still tell people about this experience because it was so great. Like it was such a great context individualization thing. Like you went looking for things in interviews and like in articles and stuff about me, and you
Yeah.
kind of put together this like narrative of timeline of my life and told me the story, and in a way that was like looking at impact, which is really important to me, and looking at how strengths has changed the industry for writers and stuff. That was actually like a really pivotal moment in my career, just in terms of like having it reflected to me by somebody whose context is really dominant. It really changed how
Wow.
I see myself. So that was a big gift. I appreciate that.
Nice. That's great. Yeah,
Keyword to
you
me,
told
that
me in
just
the
seems
middle of the
creepy.
interview. I started your history and you go, this is the most context thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yes, it was awesome. It was so great. I was like, I don't know where you found some of this stuff, dude, but this is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I get freaky with interview. I can't help it. I get freaky with interviews. But I will
Oh,
say
it's
like
great.
yeah,
It's great though.
your coaching really helped me because I was very much like trapped in this. I think the downside of being strong context is because I've faced a lot of failure and like a lot of like, rejection, really a
Yep.
lot of rejection by people. I get trapped in this like, oh, I've been rejected, so I'll always be rejected.
You always be
I'll
that way. Yep.
always be there. There's no way to escape this spiral. And
Yep.
so it was really good to talk to you and to Terry and for both of you to be like, you have to turn that off. Like, and I think you specifically were like, you've got achiever at number five. Go talk to them for a little bit. Go talk to the achiever
Yes.
person for a while, and then like come back to context and be like, see, we do good things. But yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, it was great. Um,
Yeah, it was great.
yeah. All right. So
We're
go
still
find your
recording.
coaching. Yeah, I'm gonna hit stop on the recording. We can talk a little bit more. Becca, thank you so much.